War is brutal, but what's more terrifying is how far it's evolved. Not just the weapons, but the tactics entirely. There are no warnings now, no sirens, no uniforms, no front lines. Today, a war can start and end before anyone even knows it happened. And it starts with something you were never supposed to see. The most advanced bomber in the world belongs to the United States, and no one else, not Russia, not China, not anyone, has been able to build anything close to it. It's called the B-2 Spirit, a flying wing that looks like science fiction and flies like a ghost. Radar can't see it, infrared sensors barely track it, and it can fly from the US to the other side of the planet, drop a nuclear bomb, and disappear without ever showing up on a screen. So why can't anyone else build one? It's not just the shape, it's everything else. The B-2 is coated in classified radar-absorbing materials that require constant climate-controlled maintenance. Its surface has to be flawless. If a single panel is out of alignment, even by a few millimeters, its stealth profile degrades. Even the tires are anti-static. Even the paint is radar deflecting. Just refueling one on the ground requires a technician in a sealed suit and a temperature-stabilized hangar. Most nations don't just lack the plane, they lack the infrastructure to even keep one alive. And then there's the supply chain. The B-2 uses custom manufactured polymers, exotic ceramics, and precision composites that are nearly impossible to reverse engineer without access to the original classified designs. Many of the suppliers, even today, are under non-disclosure agreements that ban them from discussing the parts they make. But maybe the biggest roadblock is software. The B-2 doesn't rely on GPS alone. It uses terrain contour matching, inertial navigation systems, and celestial tracking. Systems that let it fly low over mountains, under radar, guided by sensors that most nations haven't developed. The code running those systems isn't open source. It's been refined for decades, updated silently, and locked behind levels of clearance most militaries don't even have. And finally, there's the strategic culture problem. Most countries don't build aircraft like this, because most countries don't fight wars like the US. The B-2 is designed for power projection, to strike anywhere in the world with no warning. It exists not just to kill, but to show that it can, from anywhere at any time without being stopped. Only 21 B-2s were ever built. Each one takes over 100 hours of maintenance per flight hour. Each one requires secure hangars, climate-controlled storage, specialized technicians, and millions of dollars in upkeep. And still, no one has caught up. China has the H-20 project, Russia is developing the PAKDA, but both are heavier, louder, and nowhere near as stealthy. It was impossible for anyone else to attempt, unless they had the US military's budget, secrecy, infrastructure, and head start. This plane doesn't just fly past radar, it flies above the reach of every other military on Earth. After the horrors of World War II, the world came together and agreed on something rare. There had to be rules, even in war. In 1949, the Geneva Conventions were born, a series of international treaties designed to protect civilians, prisoners of war, medics, and the wounded. They laid out what's allowed and what isn't, how to fight a war humanely. It's one of the most widely signed agreements in history. Almost every nation has agreed to it. But agreeing doesn't mean obeying. There are rules in war, a global agreement on how to kill people politely. You can bomb a city, but not a hospital. You can shoot someone in the head, but not with poison. You can stab, explode, burn, and detonate your enemy, just not in ways deemed unnecessarily cruel. According to the Geneva Conventions, you can't use weapons that cause glass or plastic to shatter inside the body. Target someone parachuting out of a burning plane. Dress up as the enemy to trick them. Shoot soldiers using white flags to surrender. Booby trap a corpse. Starve a population as a method of war. You also can't shoot someone with bullets that expand, flatten, or mushroom. Kill using chemical or biological agents. Poison wells. Place landmines that can't self-deactivate. Use laser weapons to blind people permanently. These are the rules, and they've been broken in nearly every modern war. Napalm was legal until it wasn't. White phosphorus is banned in many cases, but still used. Cluster bombs are outlawed by over 100 countries, but not by the US, Russia, or China. The truth is, most of these rules are followed only when convenient, and violations are punished only when politically useful. The US has bombed wedding parties by mistake. No trials followed. Russia has targeted hospitals and denied it. Chemical weapons were used in Syria. The world condemned it and moved on. Because here's the ugly secret. The rules of war don't protect people. They protect power. If you lose, they call it a war crime. If you win, they call it a victory. So yes, we have rules. We just don't follow them. And most of the time, no one ever does anything about it. But don't worry. As long as you don't poison a well, you're still technically the good guy. In 1932, Australia faced a crisis. Not a foreign invasion, not civil unrest. Emus, the weird-looking birds with long necks that can't fly. After World War I, the government gave land to returning soldiers so they could farm wheat. But no one warned them about the emus. Tens of thousands migrated west, tall, fast, flightless, and completely indifferent to fences. They trampled crops, broke gates, and moved in like they owned the place. The farmers begged for help, and the government delivered with soldiers and machine guns. The plan? Simple. Eliminate the emus. The result? Disaster. The birds were too fast. The trucks couldn't keep up. The guns overheated. One group of 1,000 emus was ambushed. Only a dozen were hit. Worse, the birds adapted. They scattered into smaller flocks. They zigzagged like commandos. One army major said they'd developed a remarkable tactical awareness. After weeks of embarrassment, the military pulled out. Operation EMU was over, and the emus had won. Australia lost a war to giant birds. At least if they ever go to war again, they'll know who to enlist first. A flock of emus. Right now, hundreds of nuclear missiles are armed, loaded, and waiting. They sit in silos, submarines, and air bases around the world, connected to radar systems and early warning networks. If one is launched, anywhere, the others respond automatically. It's called mutually assured destruction. Fire one nuke, and within minutes every other nuclear nation fires back. No time for fact-checking, no time for diplomacy, no time for regret. Once they're in the air, there's no way to call them back. It takes just 30 minutes for a nuclear missile to cross continents, which means the end of civilization is always 30 minutes away. That's not theory. That's how the system works, right now. The world has come close. In 1983, Soviet computers falsely detected incoming US nukes. Protocol said, fire back. One man, Stanislav Petrov, refused. He might have saved the world. We've built a machine that can destroy the planet in half an hour. And the most terrifying part is, we never turned it off. It was Christmas Eve, 1914. World War I had just begun. Trenches stretched for hundreds of kilometers across Europe. Mud, blood, rats, artillery. Then something strange happened. British troops started hearing German voices, not yelling but singing. Silent Night, in German, then in English. Someone put up a tree, someone lit a candle, and then soldiers climbed out of the trenches, without orders, without weapons. They shook hands, shared food, traded buttons and cigarettes. Some played football in no man's land, literal enemies kicking a ball around in the middle of a battlefield. It wasn't universal, it wasn't coordinated, but it was real. In dozens of spots along the Western Front, the war just stopped, because the soldiers decided it should. It became known as the Christmas Truce. It only happened once. High command on both sides made sure of that. Anyone who tried it again the next year was threatened with punishment. Because when soldiers realize they have more in common with each other than with the people giving orders, war becomes a lot harder to justify. In 1961, a US B-52 bomber was flying over North Carolina. Standard Cold War mission. Nothing unusual. Except it was carrying 2 nuclear bombs, both live. Why? Because at the time, the US was running a program called Operation Chrome Dome. Strategic bombers flew around the clock, fully armed with nukes, ready to strike back if the Soviet Union attacked. That meant planes like this were always in the sky. And yes, they carried the real thing. On this flight, the B-52 started to break apart mid-air. As it tore open, both nuclear bombs dropped toward the ground. One slammed into a field, the other deployed its parachute and almost detonated. Every safety system failed, except one. And that was the only reason eastern North Carolina didn't disappear. The US came within one switch of nuking its own territory. Not in war, not in retaliation, just by accident. And this wasn't the only close call. There are dozens of known nuclear incidents, some just as terrifying. Dropped bombs, failed communications, alarms that turned out to be training tapes. We like to think these weapons are under tight control, but the truth is, we've gotten lucky. Really lucky. So if you're ever feeling stressed, just remember, America once nearly nuked itself twice in the same hour, or don't, as that might just make you more stressed. Most wars last for years, some last decades, one lasted just 38 minutes. In 1896, Zanzibar and Britain clashed over who would become the next sultan. Britain said no, Zanzibar said yes. So Britain opened fire, destroying a palace, sinking a yacht, and ending the entire conflict in under an hour. Calling it a war sounds like a bit of a stretch. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, in 1651, the Netherlands declared war on the Isles of Scilly, a tiny group of British islands off the southwest coast of England. There were no battles, no troops, no casualties. Then everyone forgot about it for 335 years. The war technically remained active until a historian in 1986 noticed there'd never been a peace treaty. One was finally signed, 0 shots fired. The longest war in history, fought entirely by accident. One war was shorter than a Netflix episode. The other lasted 3 centuries because no one checked the paperwork. During World War II, in a region of China occupied by the Japanese Imperial Army, a secret military program was running experiments. It was called Unit 731. On paper, it was a medical research facility. In reality, it was a torture lab. Prisoners, civilians and soldiers, were subjected to live human experimentation, vivisections with no anesthesia, frostbite testing by freezing limbs and smashing them off, deliberate infection with plague, cholera, anthrax, weapon testing using live human targets, including grenades, flamethrowers, and biological bombs. Tens of thousands of people died here. And it wasn't rogue. It was approved, funded, and protected by Japan's military leadership. But here's the part that's somehow worse. No one was ever punished. After the war, the US quietly made a deal with the leaders of Unit 731. In exchange for their data, they were granted immunity. No trials, no consequences. Japan's most horrific war crimes were buried, not because they were unknown, but because they were useful. Today, most people have never heard of Unit 731. It's not in textbooks, it's not in movies, but it happened. And some of the men who ran it lived out their lives in peace, as doctors, professors, and respected officials, while their victims were sadly erased. If World War III ever happens, it probably won't start how you'd expect. It won't begin with a formal declaration. It won't involve soldiers marching across borders. It'll happen fast, maybe without anyone even realizing it's begun. Right now, the Iran-Israel conflict is one of the world's most dangerous fault lines. It's already spilling across borders, in drone strikes, sabotage, cyber attacks. And on both sides, nuclear powers are watching. The US backs Israel, Russia and China back Iran. Indirectly, but clearly. But this isn't the first time the world stood on the edge. World War III has had more close calls than you probably realize since the last World War ended. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Soviet submarines armed with nuclear torpedoes were surrounded by US ships. One commander ordered launch, but the decision required 2 more officers to agree. They refused. If they hadn't, Florida would have disappeared, and maybe everything else with it. Then in 1983, NATO ran a military simulation called Able Archer. It was so realistic, the Soviet Union thought it was a real nuclear strike. They put their forces on high alert, fingers on the trigger. Again, nothing happened, but it was close. And if World War III ever does happen, it won't look like the ones before. There won't be trenches. There won't be time. There will be cyber attacks and tactical drone strikes. Power grids shut down, satellites blinded, banks frozen, and cities plunged into darkness. Some models suggest the first day would decide everything. And after that, there might be nothing left to fight for. But here's the strange part. Everyone knows how bad it would be. Even world leaders who talk tough, they know. No one wins, they just lose slower. That fear might be the only thing holding the world together. Not diplomacy, not peace treaties. Just the quiet, universal understanding that if World War III ever starts, it'll be the last one. We call them world wars, but that doesn't even begin to describe how unhinged they really were. Here are some rapid-fire facts about World War I and II to finish. Trench foot literally rotted soldiers' feet until they fell off, and it was so common, they gave it a name. World War I saw over 16 million animals used, including horses, pigeons, and even glowworms for lighting. In World War II, a British soldier named Mad Jack went into battle with a sword, bagpipes, and a longbow, and got kills with all three. Japan had a plan to drop plague bombs on the US West Coast using hot air balloons. The Soviets trained dogs to blow up tanks by strapping bombs to them, but they ran under their own tanks by mistake. Hitler was once nearly assassinated by a briefcase bomb. The only reason he survived is because someone nudged it behind a table leg. US soldiers were issued a comic book to explain what Nazism was. Coca-Cola created Fanta in Nazi Germany because they couldn't ship Coke during the war. An entire World War II battle was fought over a pile of empty beer bottles. It was technically a fuel depot, but still. The last soldier killed in World War I died just 60 seconds before the armistice because his commander wanted to take one last village. War isn't just strategy and politics. It's chaos. It's contradiction. It's humans trying to make rules for something that's never played fair. And no matter how advanced the weapons get, the one constant in every war is just how insane it ends up being, because history doesn't always make sense, and war, it rarely ever has.